I can't hear anything. So Master Nagarjuna, at the end of his Mula Madhyamaka says, moved by your compassion, you taught the whole sacred Dharma. In order to rid us of all distorted views, I prostrate to you, Gautama. And so, what this is teaching is that we need to overcome that of the ignorance, which is a misconception of reality, by developing the wisdom, realizing the reality as it is. And therefore, similarly, in Madhyamaka Avatara, Master Chandakirti says, in the beginning of his Madhyamaka Avatara, he praises or pays homage to great compassion. And he says that the compassion, realizing emptiness, and the non-dual wisdom, and that of the bodhicitta in its simulated experience are the so he says that so the Shravakas and the Paticca Buddha practitioners are born from the Buddhas, the Munis or the sages, and so forth. And so if we could practice compassion, then that would make us the best follower of the Buddha, and to repay his kindness as well, if we could practice great compassion. So the most important thing is to reflect on bodhicitta, combined with the wisdom realizing emptiness. So in your different places, you may be doing different practices and rituals today in connection with this auspicious day. So everyone who is able to hear me from the different religious traditions, as Buddhists, we remember the Buddha on this occasion, on this auspicious occasion. So first thing, we reflect well on bodhicitta. So for that, imagine the Buddha himself in person. And we are going to do this bodhicitta ceremony together. I'm not going to do any ritual where I perform the ritual and you repeat or anything like that, but we are all doing it together. I am a bhikshu in the teaching of the Buddha, so that is what I have, and the privilege I have as a follower of the Buddha. Otherwise, there's nothing special about me. So we are all same. So in that spirit, we are going to do the ceremony for bodhicitta. And so we will be doing the 7-limb practice. So those of you who are watching the live webcast, everyone, in front of you, imagine the Buddha, Shakyamuni, the Buddha, Bhagavan Buddha, in person, a real person there, and around him, imagine Master Nagarjuna and the great upholders of the Dharma. And so, in other words, the 17 Nalanda masters. So, including them, refers these masters, the 17 Nalanda masters, their writings are with us, that we can study them. And through the study, we can also do reflection on their meaning. And then we can develop experience of their teachings. And so, the main offering that we can present to masters like Nagarjuna and so forth are to study their texts and analyze them, so that we integrate them within ourselves. And so imagine Master Nagarjuna and his disciples, such as Chandrakirti and so forth, and also imagine Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion of all the Buddhas, and Manjushri, the embodiment of the wisdom of all Buddhas, and Arya Tara, the embodiment of enlightened activities of the Buddha, and also Maitreya, Kiddigarbha, and so forth. Imagine them as well. And so before them, as follower of the Buddha, as Rinpoche says, I've become a monk ordained in this tradition of the Buddha, and I have studied the Dharma, and I pay respect to the Buddha. As a yogi practitioner, and so reflect on the teaching of the Buddha to such an extent that the hairs on your body stands on end. And so let's say the 7-limb praise. So first we are going to say the praise to the Buddha, which is the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, which says the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one going beyond, and so forth. It's 3 times. This prayer is called the 3 continuum or something like that. 3 continuous practice. So one going beyond the completely and fully awakens one, then Dharamsala is destroyed, from the Shakya clan, and then it continues with these verses where it says, when you supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and so forth. You line among the others, freedom of 3 times, also 10 directions. With my body, speech, and mind, with the energy of aspiration for the Bodhisattva way, with a sense of deep respect, with as many bodies as atoms of the world. You Buddhas visualize as real, I bow down on every atom of Buddha's numberless as atoms. Each amidst the host of Bodhisattvas, confident of the sphere of all phenomena is entirely filled with Buddha's way, with infinite oceans of praise for you. So we have the homage to the body, with mind and speech. Surpassable offerings, unsurpassable offerings, and then confessing one's faults, and then rejoicing in the merits, urging the Tathagata to turn the wheel of Dharma, requesting them the Tathagatas to obey the person way, and finally dedicating the roots of virtues one has gathered. So whatever slight positive potentials I may have created by paying homage, offering, and acknowledging my faults, rejoicing and requesting that the Buddhas stay and teach, I now dedicate all these for the full awakening. As I said earlier, the Buddha himself first generated the bodhicitta, developed bodhicitta, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, and moved by his compassion, he developed the wisdom of emptiness, dependent origination, and then accumulated merits and wisdom over 303 countless eons. And then, as Master Nagarjuna also praises the Buddha from the point of view of this dependent arising, and finally the Buddha became enlightened. Before assuming the enlightenment, he went through the practice of austerity for 6 years. So that shows that by developing the antidotes to our negative emotions and even their imprints, with the help of the wisdom of emptiness, which is called the wisdom of all emptiness with all aspects, which means that it is combined with bodhicitta. And so, in order to show that we must follow this path, understanding dependent arising, and developing wisdom of emptiness with the help of or coupled with bodhicitta, that we must tread the path. And so, on this occasion of the full moon day of the Saga Dawa, or this month, this auspicious month, Vesak month, I thought it would be good for all of us to do this bodhicitta ceremony together. And in the big monastic institutions of learning, every year on this occasion, if you could also have this practice of taking or generating bodhicitta as a tradition, of course, for the next 20 plus years, I would also be there here. And so if you could make it an annual practice on this, on this occasion of the Sagadawa, this auspicious month, I thought it would be good. And so, let us say the verse of taking refuge, and then the verse, the other verse where we say, I take refuge in the three jewels and so forth. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through listening to the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then, with the next verse, we will do the bodhicitta. And so, as it is said in the text, so for one's own benefit, in order to fulfill one's own goal as well as the goal of others, we need bodhicitta. And the Buddhas became enlightened, fully enlightened, with the help of, through the practice of bodhicitta. So all of our temporary, short-term as well as lasting goals come from this bodhicitta. And so if we wish to be selfish, we need to be wisely selfish. So I think that bodhicitta is a very practical way of being selfish, because it makes oneself as well as one's friends and people around you happy. So if you are kind to others, then you will have more friends. If you do not, if you remain selfish, then you will not be happy, of course. You'll be suspicious about you others to the left and right, and people around you also will not be so trustworthy to you. I mean, they will not trust you. So if people, a selfish person will have some power or money, and people may come to them for their money and so forth. But if you have this altruistic attitude to help others, to take care of others, so bodhicitta is this kind of attitude which says, which thinks of helping oneself and all others. As the text says, in order to fulfill the interests of myself and others, I should develop the mind for awakening, mind of awakening, or the spirit of enlightenment. And then it says, having developed the spirit of highest enlightenment, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. And so you are actually inviting sentient beings as your guests for some kind of a party. If you, for example, if you have invited some guests to your house, and when they come, you have nothing to offer, like tea or anything, I mean, just simply a tea, that won't be so nice. So having developed the spirit of highest enlightenment, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. Now, in order to practically give benefit or fulfill the interests of all sentient beings, the most practical way is to engage in the most delightful, supreme, enlightened conduct. So all sentient beings across the expanse of space do not want suffering but want happiness. So all of them, until the end of space, you make this pledge to work for them. As Master Shantideva says, as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So, as I said earlier, to be very wisely selfish, you need to practice bodhicitta. So Master Shantideva says, all good things in the world come from wishing others to be happy. All suffering comes from wishing oneself to be happy. And he goes on to say that what needs is there to say more. Look at the difference between the Buddhas and the childish who have still remained in samsara. So we have met with the teaching of the Buddha and also particularly this instruction on the practice of cultivation of bodhicitta. And so we have an opportunity to serve others practically, and therefore there's nothing greater than to serve others but through the practice of bodhicitta. So I seek refuge in the three jewels. Let us say this together. I confess each and every wrongdoing. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to my heart the state of Buddhahood. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. In order to fulfill the aims of myself and others, I shall develop the mind for awakening. Mind of awakening. Having developed the spirit of highest enlightenment, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall enact the delightful, the supreme, enlightened conduct. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Second time, please repeat. Say this. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess each and every wrongdoing. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. In order to fulfill the aims of myself and others, I shall develop the mind for awakening. Having developed the spirit of highest enlightenment, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall enact the delightful, supreme, enlightened conduct. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess each and every wrongdoing. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to heart Buddha's enlightenment. I seek refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. In order to fulfill the aims of myself and others, I shall develop the mind of awakening. Having developed the spirit of highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall enact the delightful, supreme, enlightening conduct. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So with this, as Bodhisattva Charya says, so this is like the medicine to heal the sickness of all sentient beings. It is like the tree that gives this cool shade when some is tormented by the heat of the day. And so if you are able to determine to have this spirit of working for others' benefit, even if you may be in samsara, physically you are a samsaric being, but in your mind, it will be a worthy practice to think of others. So this is the great shade So for all the guests traveling the paths of life who wish to experience the true happiness, the Spirit will satisfy them with joy and exalt them in the highest bliss. So, actually, His Holiness is reciting these verses from Bodhisattva Charyavatara. It is the supreme medicine that cures the world's disease. It is the evergreen that shelters all beings. Wandering on the roads of life, it is the universal bridge that frees beings from wretched lives. It is the rising moon of mind that dispels the torment of addictions. It is the great sun that burns away the mighty ignorance of the world. It is the quintessential butter from the churning of the milk of Dharma. For all guests traveling the path of life who wish to experience the true happiness, the Spirit will satisfy them with joy and exalt them in the highest bliss. Today, in the presence of the Saviors, I invite all world to be my guests at the feast of temporal and ultimate bliss. May God, Titans, and all be joyful. So, what we need to think is think of benefiting others, because it has the greatest benefit for yourself as well. And therefore, and so we all have, since we all have this Buddha nature, so omniscient mind is approved on the basis of this clear awareness nature of the mind. So we have this luminous nature of the mind within ourselves. This is nothing that we need to develop afresh as such. So this, in the nature of luminosity or clarity of the mind that is within us and that is in the Buddhas are same. But because the defilements are not in the intrinsic nature of the mind, therefore, if we develop the antidotes to the destructive emotions and the stains, they will be overcome, uprooted from our mind. So the Buddha's powers and so forth, the potential for them is within ourselves, in this mind of ours. And therefore, what is said in the Mahayana Uttara Tantra is very important. And also, Abhisamaya Alamkara teaches how we progress along the path, teaching about the two truths, the nature of the path, and then the four noble truths. It has to do with the 10 instructions on the two truths, the four truths, and then the three jewels. And as Master Nagarjuna has said, the Buddha's teaching of the Buddhas are based on the two truths. So the Buddha's teaching of the Buddha is not sufficient by doing prayers alone. Of course, the prayers, saying some verses and chantings are there in all the religious traditions, which is good. But in Buddhism, we use our minds. And when you go into Tantra, there is this division of mind to the degrees of subtlety, the gross and the subtle and subtlemost and so forth. All the traditions of Buddhism that have spread in Tibet, Sajanyingma Kagyu Geluk and so forth, follow the teaching of the Buddha, which has a complete teaching of the Buddha. So, if not this time, when will we pay attention to this teaching, this complete teaching that we have? So, as Kadam masters have said, and other Indian, Tibetan masters have said, thanks to the past good karma, I have obtained this good human life, and may I not create the causes for me to push me down the abyss. So all of us should be careful and pay attention to the teaching of the Buddha. As Rinpoche also says, may I gain certainty in the teaching of the Buddha. May I be filled with this certitude in the teaching of the Buddha by understanding his teaching. And so on this auspicious occasion of Sagadawa, I have done this the ceremony for bodhicitta and so forth in order to encourage you, to spur you on the practice of the Dharma. And so every year, if you could do this practice every year by meditating on emptiness, and then also then generate bodhicitta within yourself. So may the sublime jewel of bodhicitta, so this prayer which says, may the sublime jewel bodhicitta grow in those who have not yet grown it, and may it never diminish but increase evermore in those who in whom it has taken root. And now this is the prayer for the flourishing of the Dharma. So this is homage to the 7 Buddha heroes: Vaipashin, Shikin, Viswabhu, Krakuchanda, Kanakamuni, Kashyapa, and Gautama Shakyamuni. And then the prayer says, through the hardships I have endured, formerly for being's sake and for others' sake, and through my renouncing pleasure, may the doctrine flourish long. Since I've given my livelihood for the sake of sick people who protecting needy beings, may the doctrine flourish long. Through my giving son and daughter, wealth, wife, wealth, jewels, elephant, and my chariots for awakening, may the doctrine flourish long. Through my giving to Buddhas and Prateka Buddhas, hearers, parents, ascetics, may the doctrine flourish, and so forth. And through my tasting diverse sufferings for many million eons and seeking learning for awakening and so forth. So it goes through the Buddha's practice, having practiced, Buddha's praying that his doctrine may flourish for long through the practice of his morality, and also the giving, patience, concentration, joyous effort, and wisdom. So at the end, it says that the Dharma King Tsongkhapa's Dharma method may prosper, let all adverse signs be stilled and good conditions be complete. Thanks to my and others joined to collections of the 3 times, may the doctrine of the conqueror Losang Dakpa flourished for long. And next is the prayer, which is the final Lamrim prayer, which says, from my 2 collections, vast space that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for the great length of time, may I begin to achieve leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eye is blinded by ignorance, and so forth. This is the prayer of the words of truth by His Holiness. The Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and disciples of the past, present, and future, having remarkable qualities and so forth. Immeasurably vast as the ocean, who regard all helpless sentient beings as your only child, please consider the truth of my anguished plea. Buddha's full teaching dispel the pain of the worldly experience and self-oriented peace. May they flourish, spreading prosperity and happiness throughout this spacious world. O holders of the Dharma, scholars, and realized practitioners, may your tenfold virtues practice and so forth. Thus the protected generous made vast prayers before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. O protected generous, compassionately care for those who have undergone myriad hardships, completely sacrificing their most cherished lives, bodies, and wealth for the sake of the teachings and practitioners, people, and nation. Thus protected generous made vast prayers before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, so forth. Next is the long life prayer, prayer of His Holiness. Gewe chinlap ta tende luwa mebe temba tan ta ge lasum ta be tu do ki membe gun ruba ishu Windows and dedication verses. Gewa de da tam je rab do ngo de sun she be gewa tam je ge ngo wa kan la chu do nga ba te ta gi gewe za wa de gun jang sam bo chi chi rab do ngo wa ra ki nim no be gewe temba la ku ve na cho su chen chen je be jo wa ma lu ba cho sum de be ze ne ju yu ru chi. Thank you, everyone.